All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Crew Show with a little 49er video. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue you're going to find anywhere in Northern California. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Krug sent you. Get the brisket chili. And of course, this video also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they will match you up to your first $100. Well, ESPN's senior NFL reporter Jeremy Fowler stopped by this morning on KMBR with Murph and Marcus to talk a little bit about the latest on Brandon Aiyuk. And basically what's going on here. And we're going to let you hear some of the dialogue between Murph and Marcus and Fowler. But what's going on here basically is that the Niners are set to pay Brock Purdy probably north of $50 million next year. Not this year, next year. So everybody's trying to race to get their deal done now, because after Brock gets his deal done, there's not going to be a lot of room under the cap. And so all the premier players either want to be signed or are expressing an interest in re-signing, and they want to get this done before Purdy signs. So let's listen to Murph and Marcus with Jeremy Fowler, ESPN senior NFL reporter, from earlier today on KMBR, talking a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and the Niner contractual situations as we sit here 10 days into the month of June. So here's a little Murph and Marcus with Jeremy Fowler.
I guess my opening question is, as they head into this sort of dark period before training camp, how would you characterize the negotiations between the 49ers and Aiyuk? Is it ice cold? Is it revving? What's up?
Probably neither. I wouldn't call it ice cold necessarily, but I wouldn't call it revving either. Sides have talked, and it's probably reached a little bit of a stagnation point, but I don't think that's overly concerning because, last time they got a wide receiver deal done at a high clip was Deebo Samuel. I believe it was 2 years ago, happened in July. So this is the time where teams can reset. Front offices are taking time off a little bit now as they get through minicamp and they're in the summer, but certainly there's no reason to majorly panic until you get to late July, early August, and, especially if Aiyuk's not showing up, which he didn't to minicamp. So it's a complicated deal because Aiyuk's catapulted himself into the top 10 wide receiver conversation with his performance last year. But at the same time, he's not in that Justin Jefferson class where it's sort of a no-brainer to pay him. And the market is what it is. Amon-Ra St. Brown hit the $30 million mark. I believe that's a benchmark for Aiyuk, at least in some metrics. He'd like to either match or beat him. So makes it complicated.
Jeremy, we saw the Chiefs take a different strategy in getting rid of Tyreek Hill, of course, trading him to the Miami Dolphins because they did not want to pay him $30 million per year. Do you think that possibility could come up with the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk, especially when they have so many other high-paid players on this roster?
Well, I think that opportunity probably passed around the draft. I guess it could rekindle, but it sounds like there was, from what I understand, pretty good interest from teams in Aiyuk around the NFL draft week and days 1 and 2 of the draft, and it would have required a high pick. One team told me they thought it would have been like an A.J. Brown type package. So first-round pick, plus you'd have to pay him, set it up in advance, big contract. So teams really wanted to go so far there, and then Deebo Samuel was part of trade talks. They materialized. So now here they are. They got both guys, and one of them makes a lot of money, and the other's going to have to make a lot of money. So I don't know. It'd be tough to trade him at this point and get value. I mean, you'd have to get a lot of return for a player of that caliber, and I just don't know if teams are going to want to do that in June. I've been surprised before. But it's tough because of the Chiefs. You make that comparison. They have Patrick Mahomes. So you can kind of do whatever you want when you have Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or guys of that caliber because they can make it work without an elite wide receiver. And we've seen that with both players. Now, that's not discounting Brock Purdy and his ability to work with various personnel, but a little bit of a different circumstance in that way.
Talking to Jeremy Fowler, ESPN, who covers the NFL so closely in the Aiyuk situation. Get your opinion from the outside looking in and talking around the league, Jeremy, about if indeed, what are the Niners' chances or odds of not offering him the money? Matt Mayoko, our buddy at NBC Sports Bay Area, came on our show last week, and he said, they might kick the can down the road, make him play on his 5th-year option at $14 million, see what happens. How does that sound to you, given what you know of the league scenario and the landscape of receivers getting paid?
It's funny, I'd almost like to see that, not necessarily specific to Aiyuk, but just when teams challenge players like that, how do they respond? Do they sit out? Is this something that is compelling throughout the year? Do they end up just having to play on it because they don't want to incur too many fines? Like, that's sort of the song and dance that you probably don't see as much of anymore. And that's partly why the market has got so explosive with these players making massive numbers. One, the cap's gone up a lot every year. But two, you kind of see less of the holdouts and less of the stare down, that deep into things. I'd be curious how Aiyuk would handle that. I don't know for sure, but on one end, it's like, okay, you're really not going to get this done, and then you take it really personally, and then maybe you don't show up for camp. Or the flip side is players like him, if you make it to free agency and you're coming off another 1,300-yard season, then you're set up to make even more than you would have. Like, teams will have to overpay for you. So that is attractive to some players, depending on who it is. Yeah, that would be interesting. I don't know. I don't know how that would shake out, because there's so many fines that you would incur if you stayed away. It'd be different if you're on the franchise tags like T. Higgins, and he can just not sign that thing for as long as he wants in Cincinnati and just wait it out and show up whenever he wants to. So it's different when you're under contract, and it's the 5th-year option is enough money that it's hard to pass that up. So, but then you got, this is a team that's trying to win a title, so then your best receiver is going to be disgruntled all year. Like, I just don't know if you want that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brandon Aiyuk still looking for that contract extension. Someone who did get a contract extension is Christian McCaffrey. Signs a 2-year, $38 million extension. Jeremy, what's your breakdown of that contract and the overall value that Christian McCaffrey provides his offense?
Well, really, it's sort of a no-brainer. I mean, it gets him some more guaranteed money, gets him more money in his pocket now, but it really doesn't stretch your salary cap too badly. He was already at a pretty big number, and, it's just really a salute to all the work he's done. As opposed to like a back-breaking contract. So to me, it seems like a win-win for both sides. It is a little interesting against the backdrop of the Aiyuk situation. So I can't imagine he's overly happy about that. I can't speak for him, obviously, but it's an interesting choice when you have that player who's been actively negotiating with you is 1 year away from free agency instead of 2. But if you're the San Francisco, you can argue, we didn't change a ton with his contract. It is an extension, but most of his deal is still in place, and he's unquestionably the best player in his position now. That's not even a question anymore. Maybe a couple years it was a question, but now he's number one. So Justin Jefferson, Christian McCaffrey, if you're number one in your position, you get that taken care of typically.
Jeremy Fowler joining us here, talking 49ers here. And so you reported that Trent Williams, the veteran left tackle, even though he's getting paid a lot of money, still could be looking for a new deal. What's the news there you reported?
So, yeah, I just, look, it's something that multiple people have brought up to me as a possibility. Like, hey, there are whispers that he would like a new deal. I didn't, it wasn't more like a splash report or anything. I heard it enough to mention it. I'll say that. But, it's not anything I've confirmed as hard and fast, but there are certainly whispers among people in the industry who think that he wants a new deal or will want a new deal. And it's in part because he's the highest, he's not the highest paid player at his position anymore, and he's clearly still the best, even though he's 35. So I think he's due $20 million this year, 22 next year. So, it's just low enough compared to where the market's going where he could need an adjustment. I just see it as something that will come to a head. I don't know what it means or how it will shake out, but they're going to probably have to take care of him one more time.
All right, there you go. Jeremy Fowler, senior NFL reporter from ESPN, stopping by with Murph and Marcus. And I don't know if anything really got decided there, but it was an interesting conversation. Ultimately, the Niners and Aiyuk have had contract talks, but those contract talks have not reached an impasse, and they have not intensified to the point where the deal is nearly done. So we're in a holding pattern. The Niners usually get these contract extensions done with their great players right before the start of camp, and it's probably what's going to happen here. It didn't happen with Bosa, as he didn't sign until 5 days before the Niners-Steelers played in week 1 last year. I think the Niners would love to avoid that situation with Aiyuk this summer. But how it stands currently is that the Niners and Aiyuk's agent have had contract talks. They are talking. They have exchanged proposals and ideas, but nothing's getting to the point of where it's almost done. The talks have not intensified, and there's no resolution in sight. Now, how he was asked, Fowler was asked based on his sources, how would you term their current negotiations? And he's not willing to say, hey, they're at an impasse, but I think he thinks it's safe to say that maybe the contract talks between the two sides have stagnated. I think stagnated is the word that he used. And, he says it's, if you really look at it, it's somewhat of a complicated contract. Why? Because, Brandon Aiyuk has quietly become a top 10 NFL wide receiver, but he's not in that elite Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill category. He's beneath that. I was just looking at the odds for the number one receivers as far as yards are concerned in the upcoming year. And they had Aiyuk at 22-1 to lead the NFL in receptions. That put him 14th on the list. So according to the gamblers, there's 14. He's the 14th leading receiver to lead the NFL in receptions. So there's 13 receivers that they project to have more receptions in the year ahead than Brandon Aiyuk, and he's number 14 on the list. So he's supposed to have the 14th most receptions in the year ahead. So that's obviously very, very good and puts him in a high paid category. But that's that's not inside the top 10. That's outside the top 10. And that's not approaching Justin Jefferson at the top of the league or Jamar Chase at the top of the league. He's among the best receivers, but it's somewhat subjective. Is he a top 5 receiver that's numbers are suppressed by the team that he's on with all the other mouths to feed inside this offense? Or is he a top 15 guy who, gets to kind of masquerade as he could be a better player than that? He could be a top 5 guy. He's just not getting the ball. So it's like, what is he? Is he better than his numbers? I think most people would say yes. But how much better than his numbers? And where does he sit? He's not the best receiver in football. He's not top 5. You could argue he's top 10. You could argue he's top 15. I think what's not arguable is he's top 20. But he wants money, it sounds like, in the top 5. And I don't know if he's going to get it from the 49ers. So he the boys asked him about the trade window and, how Kansas City the Chiefs and the Raiders and a couple of these teams, the Buffalo Bills have instead of paying their top wide receiver, they wound up trading their top wide receiver. Devontae Adams got dealt. Tyreek Hill got dealt. Stephon Diggs got dealt. Well, he thinks that the trade window may have passed in April when the draft passed. The Niners shopped Aiyuk during the draft. They shopped Deebo during the draft. They obviously had a high price tag. They didn't get what they wanted, and they kept both players. Matt Mayoko also is reporting that the Niners may make Aiyuk play on his 5th-year option this year at $14.1 million. And I guess the $1 million question that Jeremy Fowler brought up to Murph and Marcus was, how much do the Niners care about their chemistry? How much do the Niners care if Aiyuk is sitting there at his locker all year disgruntled right in the middle of their locker room? Do they care a ton about that and they want to avoid it at all costs? Do they not care that much about it? And they're like, you know what? If that's the deal, that's the deal. So that's the answer. We don't know. We don't know how much the Niners care if Aiyuk's camp sits pissed off in the corner of the room all year because he didn't get his contract. While this is going on, CMC, who is the number 1 running back in the NFL, got his contract redone, and Fowler thinks it's a win-win deal where the team wins and obviously the player wins by getting a little bit more guaranteed money. He also has reported that Trent Williams, according to the people that he's talking to, is potentially looking for a new deal too. Trent Williams is the best left tackle in the NFL. So, I mean, when you're the best at your position, like CMC is at running back and Trent Williams is at tackle, it suddenly becomes a little bit easier in some ways, even though the numbers are bigger, to redo your deal because you know exactly where you sit in the lineage of the other guys at your position. What's complicating this and making it difficult, and Fowler pointed this out, is that the Niners may have the most star-studded roster in the NFL, and that's really the problem. That everybody wants to get paid before Brock Purdy is going to make $50 to $55 million. So there's a rush to get extension done because you want to make sure you get your extension done before Brock gets his done, because at that point, there'll probably be no more money. So Trent wants to get paid. CMC got paid. Aiyuk wants to get paid. Deebo's already been paid. And then they asked Jeremy Fowler, based on the draft and the offseason that we've seen thus far, who's the Niners' number one contender? If the Niners are the top team in the NFC, who's their number one contender? And Fowler said Detroit. He thinks it's the Lions. I would say it's either the Lions, the Eagles, or the Packers. I think those are probably the three teams, and then there's a drop-off after that. Maybe you got Rams, Cowboys somewhere in there, Falcons, Buccaneers, Seattle. But I would say that top tier is probably Detroit, Green Bay, and Philadelphia as far as the top three contenders outside of the 49ers inside the NFC. So interesting conversation. Nothing has gotten decided yet. The talks continue, but they have not intensified to the point where they're on the doorstep of getting something done. Fowler believes the talks have stagnated a little bit. He believes it's a complicated negotiation because is Aiyuk a top 5 receiver? Is he a top 10? Is he top 15? He's not in the Jefferson category, but he's probably higher than maybe some would say. Some might have him in between 15 and 20. He's probably be between 10 and 15 as far as where he ranks as far as receivers in the league. And then the question is, do you pay him like a top 5 guy, even though he maybe is more of a top 10 guy? We're going to find out. We're going to find out what the Niners game plan is. But the ultimate question, and the one that Fowler brought up, is how much do the Niners brass, Shanahan, Lynch, Parag, how much do they care if they tell Aiyuk, as Mayoko has suggested they might, hey, you're going to play on your 5th-year option and for $14.1 million, and we'll revisit this next year? How does he react to that? Is he pissed off? Is he sitting there in the corner of the room stewing? Is he disgruntled all year? Does he have a bad attitude all year? And do the Niners want that? And then if that's the case, do they wind up trading one of their receivers? And could Aiyuk be that receiver traded, despite the fact that he's considered the better of the two between him and Deebo? Could they wind up moving Aiyuk because Aiyuk, Deebo's okay with where he's at because he's been paid, and Aiyuk is not okay with where he's at. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the 49ers handle this from the standpoint of, is Aiyuk unhappy? And if he is unhappy, how does it manifest itself? And what do they do about it? And do they care if he's unhappy? And does this deal get done right before the beginning of the season? And if so, does Aiyuk have a backslide the way that Deebo and Bosa had a production backslide after they held out? I think that's one of the questions that we don't have an answer to either. All right, the video brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the title sponsor of the Krug Show. And, of course, we're brought to you also by Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, K-R-U-E-G, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.